hammered against the rusted tin roof of the auction barn, drumming a hollow rhythm into the dusk. Inside, under dim lights and thicker silence, tired men leaned on splintered railings, their eyes following the last few animals paraded through like remnants of forgotten lives. Then came the dog, thin, ragged, unmoving. No one bid, no one spoke. But what if this wasn't just a stray? What if this forgotten creature carried a secret the world tried to bear? Before we uncover the truth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what would you have done at that auction? The late afternoon sun bled rust-red across the sky as Malik Henderson leaned against the battered hood of his old Dodge pickup. The engine clicked as it cooled, a metallic heartbeat in the silence that wrapped around the rural outskirts of Savannah, Georgia. It had taken him nearly 2 hours to get to the edge-of-town auction barn, a half-forgotten pit stop for unwanted livestock and repossessed property. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just something to fill the hollow between sunrise and sunset. Something that might distract him from the gnawing silence of the house, from the framed photo of Amira on the mantel that never stopped smiling, even after the world did. The barn was old and sagging, its tin roof rattling with every gust of warm wind. Malik stepped through the wooden doors, nodding to the familiar smell of hay, mildew, and distant regret. Inside, a few scattered buyers were bidding half-heartedly on items. Crates of cracked tools, bent fencing, a broken-down ATV. But Malik's eyes were drawn to the far side, where a makeshift pen had been set up. Behind the splintered railings, a cluster of dogs huddled or paced, tails low, some trembling with exhaustion. And then he saw him. The dog sat alone in the corner of the pen, a German shepherd, black and tan, his coat dull, ears nicked, ribs showing faintly beneath the grime. His eyes were what stopped Malik in his tracks. They weren't scared. They weren't wild. They were alert, calculating, watching everything. And yet he didn't bark, didn't flinch, didn't move. "Doesn't make a sound," the auctioneer muttered, catching Malik. "3 weeks we've had him. No one wants him. He just sits like that all day. Ain't good for nothing." Malik said nothing, just stared at the dog a moment longer, something prickling in the back of his neck. He knew that look. He'd seen it on the faces of soldiers behind sandbags. The stillness of waiting, the tension of purpose. "Started at 25, the auctioneer barked. Silence. Jackal from someone by the loading bay. "Should have put him down with the others." Another silence. Malik raised a hand. 25. The gavel cracked the silence. "Sold." To the man with the death stare. The dog didn't resist as Malik loaded him into the back of the truck, though he didn't climb willingly either. He stood, statue still, as Malik lifted his wiry frame up into the truck bed, securing the old cage with rope and a ratchet strap. The drive home was quiet, save for the occasional rattle of the trailer gate. Malik watched the mirror, noting how the dog didn't sit or lie down. He stood, facing forward, head high, like a soldier. Malik's house sat on the edge of Pine Hollow, a place where asphalt turned to gravel and neighbors didn't look too closely at your business. The screen door creaked as he opened it, the house smelling faintly of wood smoke and lemon oil. He led the dog Bruno, he decided, to the enclosed back porch. A clean blanket, water, and a bowl of leftover chicken waited. Bruno didn't eat, didn't drink. He sniffed the room once, then sat with his back to the wall, facing the sliding door, eyes on the yard. That night Malik lay awake, the ceiling fan creaked overhead. Outside a chorus of crickets droned, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching the house. When he rose to check the porch, he found Bruno exactly where he'd left him. But now the dog was stand still, ears high, eyes locked on the dark line of woods beyond the yard. "You sense it too, huh?" Malik muttered, folding his arms. "I don't know what the hell you are yet, but you ain't no mutt." He left the porch light on. The next morning, the food was still untouched, but the blanket had been raked into a tight bundle in the corner. Brunon had moved it himself, sleeping with his back protected, facing both the door and the window exactly like a field operative would in enemy territory. Malik poured coffee, black and bitter. He watched through the kitchen window as Bruno patrolled the porch with quiet intention. The dog didn't play, didn't stretch or yawn, just moved with the quiet economy of something built for efficiency, for function. It was like watching muscle memory wrapped in fur. Malik said under his breath. You're like me after the Fallujah op. Later that day, Malik brought out an old tennis ball. Tossed it once. Bruno didn't budge. Tossed it again. Nothing. But when Malik bent to tie his boot and his hand brushed the hunting knife on his belt, Bruno's ears twitched. Eyes snapped to attention. Body shifted slightly. Not aggressive. Not fearful. Just, you know that sound. You know what a blade means. Bruno's eyes met his then, just for a second, and Malik saw it like a ghost flickering behind glass. Watching. The dog had moved silently through the house. No bark, no scratch, just there. Guarding. Malik leaned back, chest rising and falling. Who trained you? He whispered. Bruno didn't answer, but Malik felt it now deep in his gut. This wasn't just some broken down mutt. Had a past. And that past had followed him home. By the third day, the silence between Malik and Bruno had settled into something almost ritualistic. An understanding born not from trust but from mirrored vigilance. Malik had lived with silence before, in war zones and empty homes, but this one felt different. This silence had purpose. The dog still hadn't barked, still hadn't eaten more than a few bites, but he had begun to follow Malik from room to room, not out of affection but out of habit. Tracking. Covering. It was the kind of tale you wanted in a firefight. That morning, Malik poured himself a cup of coffee, the steam curling upward like ghosts over an open grave. He watched Bruno through the screen door, watching the woods. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move, just sat with an intensity that unnerved even a man like Malik who'd seen the worst of humanity stitched into sand and steel. Something itched at the back of Malik's mind, a feeling like a splinter under the skin. He needed answers. Later that afternoon, he decided to give Bruno a bath not because the dog cared but because Malik needed something to do with his hands. Something normal, something routine. He filled a galvanized tub out back with warm water from the old hose and heater setup his wife had once used to water her rose garden. Bruno didn't resist. As Malik worked the dirt and grime out of the dog's thick fur, he noticed something odd near the animal's flank, just above the rear leg, where the coat grew darker. At first he thought it was a scar or maybe a patch of discolored skin. But when the hot water rolled over it again, something shimmered beneath the surface. Malik squinted, leaned in, and rubbed gently with his thumb. A faint shape began to emerge, a grid pattern pixelated and angular. And then it clicked, literally and figuratively. It was a QR code, partially obscured, faded, but unmistakable. "You the hell," Malik whispered under his breath, sitting back on his heels. No shelter would have tattooed that, no vet clinic, no breeder. This was precision work done to be hidden. A tag, or a tracker, maybe both. The moment lingered and Bruno didn't react. He just stood there letting the hot water cascade off him, eyes still on the tree line. Malik dried the dog in silence. Thoughts raced. Once Bruno was settled back on the porch, Malik went inside, grabbed his phone, and opened the scanner app he used for groceries and deliveries. He hesitated a second. Something about it felt like prying, like he was opening a door that couldn't be closed, but his thumb moved on instinct. The phone buzzed, scanning, pulled steady, and then, code recognized, redirecting. The screen flickered, glitched, and then went black. For half a second, Malik thought his phone had died. But then a single line of text appeared in white against a pitch-black background. No logo, no formatting, just 5 words. Echo 7, pension order pending. Malik stared at the screen. His throat tightened. Echo 7. It sounded like a call sign. Military. Covert. He tapped the screen, tried to scroll, to zoom, but nothing responded. No back button, no exit. And then a timer appeared counting down from 30 seconds. Malik's thumb hovered again. Before he could react, the screen blinked and another line of text appeared. Confirm identity to proceed. The project's heavy background noise freaking me out profusely. What the hell is this? Malik whispered. He backed out, tried to shut the app, but it wouldn't close. His heart began to pound, memories rushing like floodwaters breaking through a dam. Echo 7. It wasn't familiar, not directly, but it felt like something adjacent to operations he'd only heard whispered about. Black projects, units that didn't officially exist. He looked outside. Bruno was still watching the woods. Silent. Waiting. Malik set the phone down on the kitchen table and stared at it like it might explode. It now displayed only one word, in a blood-red serif font. Defied. He powered the phone off, then back on. This time the app was gone. Vanished. Not in recent apps, not in storage, just gone. Malik didn't like mysteries, especially not the ones that found their way into his house. He walked back outside, knelt next to Bruno, and looked the dog dead in the eyes. "What are you?" he murmured, voice low, even. Bruno tilted his head slightly. Malik reached out, let his hand rest gently behind the dog's ear. "Who trained you? Who did this to you?" The dog didn't blink, didn't move, but something shifted in his stare. Not warmth, not affection, just focus. Malik leaned back, shook his head, and muttered, "Goddamn ghost with 4 legs." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He pulled the curtain back every hour, scanning the yard, half expecting headlights or a black helicopter or some ghost in fatigues with a suppressed sidearm. But nothing came. Bruno paced, then settled by the door again. Every time Malik's feet touched the floor, Bruno's head snapped up. This wasn't dog behavior. It was operational readiness. Malik dug through the old army trunk in his garage files, discharge papers, encrypted drives he never turned over, a few unauthorized souvenirs of missions long buried. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just something that might make sense of the unease in his chest. But he found nothing. No mention of Echo 7, no unit patches, no whispers. The next day, curiosity got the better of him. He took the phone to a friend, Marcus Bell, a former signal intelligence analyst who now taught computer science at Savannah Tech. They met at a diner just off Route 17. Malik explained what happened, showed him the area on Bruno's coat, then waited while Marcus tinkered with a backup of Malik's device, restored the cache, pulled the raw code from the app history. "It isn't just some QR generator," Marcus said, voice low. "This is embedded with layer upon layer of access restrictions, like military-grade firewalls. That redirect? It didn't take you to a regular website. It had a server with a bounce protocol across 3 continents. That means somebody's watching." Watching what? Not what, Malik. Who? Malik said nothing. He already knew the answer. Baru wasn't some abandoned mutt. He was connected to something bigger, something lethal, and someone somewhere had just been notified that the code had been scanned. A door had opened, and Malik didn't know what would come through it. He drove home with the windows down, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. Bruno met him at the porch, eyes locked onto his like he was reading every thought behind them. Malik crouched, stared at the patch on the dog's side again. The scar, the code, the symbol of something buried, something alive. "Echo 7, he whispered. The wind picked up, and Bruno's ears perked. The morning after Malik visited Marcus Bell, sleep clung to him like wet canvas. He brewed coffee with the kind of grim deliberation only a soldier could manage. One eye on the percolator, the other on Bruno, who remained exactly where he had been all night, coiled like tension itself at the foot of the door. The unease hadn't left Malik's bones. If anything, it had deepened. The words Echo 7 had echoed like the opening note of a requiem, each beat louder, and it wasn't just a ghost of code anymore. It was real. Someone somewhere had put that code on Bruno, then tried to erase it. That meant one thing. Bruno wasn't just discarded. He was buried, and someone was trying to keep him buried. But Malik had never been good at letting things stay under the dirt. Not when the dirt was laced with lies. Later that day, Malik made a call he hadn't expected to ever make again. He dug out a crumpled, sweat-stained notebook from an ammo can in his shed and flipped through until he found a name scribbled in tight, all-caps handwriting: Nick Vasquez. Vasquez had served with Malik during his second tour. A contractor with strange clearance and even stranger story. After retiring from the field, he had vanished into the deeper pockets of military logistics, and rumor had it, wound up somewhere near DC, doing consulting. Malik didn't need to know what that meant. He just needed answers. The phone rang 4 times before clicking to a soft, distorted voice. "Who gave you this number?" Malik didn't bother with pleasantries. "It's Henderson, I need to talk about Echo 7. Silence. Then a faint breath. "Jesus Christ, Malik, where did you hear that?" "I didn't hear it, I saw it. On a damn dog." The line went dead. Malik stood in the middle of the kitchen, foam still to his ear, Bruno at his side, watching like always, like a shadow waiting for the next mission. It took 3 hours before Vasquez called back. This time the voice wasn't scrambled. It was tired, ground down. "You have a dog with Echo 7's mark? Is it marked on the left flank 3 inches above the hip, QR style with an ID grid buried under thermal ink?" Malik felt a chill spread across his spine. "Exactly that." "Then you've got him," Vasquez said. "The one they swore never made it out." "What is he?" "He's not what, he's a who." Malik, he wasn't just trained. He was designed, Gen 6 Neuro K9 initiative. Autonomous response, direct action conditioning, full sensor combat rig. But they never called it that officially. To the brass, he was just Unit Echo 7. Malik gripped the counter. What happened to him? It was an operation. Silent Gate, Syria-Turkish border, 2018. Classified under Omega Spectre, Bruno was part of a breach team sent into a village blacked out by satellite interference. What happened there was supposed to be sealed forever. But it wasn't, Malik murmured. Because someone tattooed that code on him. Because he's still alive. Exactly, Vasquez said. He've got a compressed file, redacted mostly, but I kept it when I left. It's a risk just talking about it. I'll send it under a dead VPN. Don't respond, just read it. Then destroy the file. 10 minutes later, Malik's laptop pinged with an encrypted message buried under a shell company domain. He cracked it open using the old Army decryption toolkit he'd kept for no reason other than habit. And then he read. The file began with a mission summary. Objective, secure intel package from known insurgent facility 3F. High-value targets, potential child hostages, 2,400 HRS. Scrolling further, the file began to fragment. Black boxes and retractions covered entire paragraphs. But one section, one that had slipped through the sensor's net, remained intact. Visual Recovery Unit Echo 7/Bodycam 417. Malik clicked the attachment. What played next turned his stomach to ice. The footage was grainy, night vision overlay green and harsh. Bruno, clearly visible in the upper left HUD, moved through narrow corridors with mechanical grace. Gunfire crackled, smoke filled the screen. Voices shouted. Then, a turn into a room dirt floor, a child crying in the corner, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Bruno surged forward, body low, then turned, placing himself between the child and the incoming fire. A figure appeared in the doorway, armed, shouting in Arabic. A shot rang out. Bruno lunged. Seconds later, the camera picked up another figure entering the room. Different uniform. Cleaner, more expensive. The figure raised a sidearm and shot the man Bruno had subdued. Executed him. The child screamed. Then the figure looked directly at the body cam, face half obscured by the muzzle flash, but the rank visible a general star. Malik froze the frame. Enhanced. The face came into focus. He knew that face. General Richard Beckett. Decorated, untouchable. Soon-to-be presidential candidate. The video cut out. Corrupted after that moment. Deliberate, controlled, deleted in all official versions. Except Bruno had carried it. Embedded. Hidden in muscle and memory, and maybe in more ways than Malik yet understood. He leaned back in his chair, mind reeling. You were there, he whispered to the dog. You saw it. You saved her. And then they tried to erase you. Bruno blinked. That same unreadable calm. The weight of knowledge no beast should carry. Malik rose from the chair, closed the laptop and crushed it beneath his boot. Sparks and glass exploded beneath the pressure. No evidence, just memory. Then, outside, a sound. Brûlé stood sharply, ears high, head tilted. Something had changed in the air. Malik reached for the rifle under the couch. The air that night had weight to it, like something unseen pressing down on the house from all directions. Malik stood in the front room, lights off, fingers wrapped around the barrel of his old Winchester 1300, peering through the slit between the blinds. Outside, the gravel road stretched into darkness, barely lit by the distant flicker of a failing street lamp. But what caught his attention wasn't the road. It was the SUV parked 20 yards down, matte black, engine silent, no headlights. It hadn't been there yesterday, or maybe it had. But tonight was the first time Malik felt its presence the way a man feels the cold steel of a pistol on his back. The same vehicle had appeared on and off for the last 2 nights. Never close, never loud, but always watching. There was no driver's silhouette, no movement. It just sat there, too polished to belong to anyone local, too still to be a coincidence. He didn't call the police. He'd done enough time in places where authority wore different uniforms depending on who paid more. Besides, there was no law that said you couldn't park your car on a public road. But Malik knew patterns, and this wasn't just someone passing through town. Whoever sat in that SUV wasn't lost. They were waiting, for him, or worse for Bruno. Leash harness was still ready. Bruno, for his part, was calm, almost unnaturally so. He sat at the back door like a statue, facing the tree line, not the road. Like he knew that whatever threat lay beyond that glass wasn't coming from the front. The dog had been quiet for hours, but then, just after midnight, his ears twitched. His head turned sharply. Then he stood, walked to Malik, nudged his leg once, and trotted toward the mudroom. Malik followed, half on instinct, grabbing his boots, slipping into his coat, loading a sidearm he hadn't touched in years. Bruno didn't look back. He moved with silent purpose, pausing only to glance at Malik once before pushing open the screen door with his snout. They moved into the woods behind the house, Malik's flashlight flickering, Bruno's eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The night was cool but not cold, and the trees swallowed sound like a... No wind, no insects, no owls. Just silence. Bruno led them down a narrow path Malik hadn't walked in months, toward the old ranger trail that ran parallel to the river. After 10 minutes, the dog stopped, sniffed the ground, then turned sharply off the path, ducking under a dead branch and into thicker brush. Malik cursed under his breath, but followed. Branches scraped his arms. Damp earth clung to his boots, and still Bruno moved like a ghost. 10 more minutes passed before they reached it. A rusted chain-link fence, half collapsed, surrounding what once must have been a utility shed or ranger outpost. The padlock was old, rusted, but snapped off with 2 solid hits from Malik's boot. Inside, the air was musty, the smell of oil and mildew thick. Shelves lined the walls, filled with broken tools, plastic bins, and decaying manuals. Bruno stepped forward, nudged a crate aside, then pressed his paw against a loose floor panel. It creaked. Malik raised an eyebrow. "Dead serious?" he muttered, crouching down. He pried the panel loose, revealing a shallow crawl space beneath the floor. Inside, wrapped in an oily cloth, was a small black case the size of a shoebox. Malik pulled it out, unwrapped it. The case bore no markings, just a faint scuff in the shape of a chevron. He opened it. Inside sat a solid-state drive, military-grade, reinforced casing. Taped to its lid was a yellow sticky note, barely legible. "If found, do not plug, use secured device," containing H-417 logs. Malik stared at the note, then looked at Bruno, who now sat calmly, watching him like a teacher waiting for the student to catch up. H-417, that was the same camera unit Vaskers had mentioned, Bruno's body cam feed from Silent Gate. Malik's pulse quickened. This wasn't just backup, this was the real archive. The one someone had buried so deep they were willing to burn entire departments just to keep it hidden. Malik pocketed the drive and replaced the floorboard, leaving the shack as untouched as possible. As they exited, Bruno froze suddenly, ears high, head tilted. Malik instinctively dropped to a crouch, pressing against the wall. Then he heard it too, tires crunching gravel. Back near the road. Low voices, the kind that travel far when whispered in silence. No flashlights, just movement. They were being followed. Malik and Bruno took a longer route back, moving along the creek until they came out behind the neighbor's barn 2 lots over. By the time they reached the house, the black SUV was gone, but fresh tire marks on the dirt shoulder said someone had been there, waiting longer than before. Inside, Malik locked the doors, set the alarms, and placed the SSD inside a hollowed-out book in his bookshelf. He wasn't going to plug it in here. Not with unsecured Wi-Fi. Not with potential surveillance. Bruno lay at his feet as he sat on the couch, neither of them speaking. Then, without warning, Bruno stood, walked to the sliding glass door, and growled. Low, deep. The kind of sound you don't hear unless you've spent time beside death. Malik stood and looked outside. A second vehicle. Not an SUV. A truck this time, parked across the street, no headlights. Malik waited until the sky began to soften, until the pink bleed of sunrise pushed the shadows from the edges of his property. He hadn't slept, neither had Bruno, who remained alert near the fireplace, his eyes never straying far from the front door. The SSD sat on the table like a silent threat, compact but far heavier than its weight suggested. Malik knew better than to plug it into anything connected to the grid. So he dug out an old encrypted laptop, something left over from his time in Signals. It was a black brick with a wiped OS and an air-gapped processor. The kind used in situations where digital footprints weren't just a risk, they were a death sentence. He booted it up slowly, the sound of its whirring fan the only noise in the room aside from Bruno's steady breathing. Malik slid the SSD into the drive bay, paused, and entered a string of command prompts he hadn't typed in over a decade. The screen flickered, then bloomed with a directory tree, dozens of folders, each labeled in coded timestamps. He clicked the one marked sgate_417_raw. Inside were 10 video files, each roughly 10 minutes long, tagged by internal bodycam software. Bruno's cam. He opened the first. The footage was dark, overexposed by infrared. Dust danced in the frame like ash. Voices murmured in clipped military jargon as a fire team crept through what looked like a war-damaged compound. Bruno's head moved like a gimbal, smooth and precise, feeding every frame to the handler's monitor. Nothing abnormal yet. Then the fourth video. Malik opened it, and everything changed. The timestamp placed the recording at 0500 hours. Bruno entered the courtyard. Men in civilian clothes knelt in a line, hands behind their heads. Armed soldiers, clearly American, stood behind them. The commander, off-screen, barked in a cold, familiar voice. "Confirm identities. Eliminate outliers." One of the soldiers hesitated. "Sir, this one? He's the local interpreter. He's worked with us." The voice cut him off. "I said eliminate outliers." Malik froze the video, rewound, enhanced. The camera panned slightly as Bruno adjusted position, just enough to catch a glint of light off a badge. Commander stepped forward into frame, partially backlit by rising sun. His face turned, revealing the high cheekbones, squared jaw, and unmistakable glare of General Richard Beckett. Malik felt his stomach lurch. There was no mistake. Beckett had given the kill order. The next moment, the interpreter protested, shouted something in Arabic. Another soldier raised his rifle, but Beckett stepped in, calm and calculated. He drew his sidearm and executed the man with a single shot to the head. Blood sprayed the dirt wall behind. Bruno flinched but held position. The camera didn't blink. Neither did Beckett. He turned, checked the line, then walked off screen like he had just signed a memo. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The interpreter was dead. The others followed. Malik slammed the laptop shut, breath shallow, rage blooming in his chest like fire licking gasoline. The file proved not just a war crime, it showed intent. Beckett hadn't lost control. He had commanded it. He had silenced a witness, the same man whose face now graced campaign posters, smiling from podiums preaching about restoring honor and unity to the country. The same man whose name echoed through newsrooms as the likely next commander. Bruno let out a low growl, not at Malik but at something beyond, as if he too understood the weight of what had just been uncovered. Malik stood, pacing, fists clenched. "We can't sit on this," he muttered. "Someone needs to see it." But a question gnawed at the back of his mind. Who would believe it? Who could they trust? He reopened the laptop and began scanning the remaining files. The seventh video caught his eye. It was shorter, untagged, and lacked the usual metadata. Curious, Malik clicked it. The footage began inside a cement room lit by a single bare bulb. A man tied to a chair, bruised, bleeding, argued with someone off Arabic again. The camera shifted, and the face of the man came into view. Malik froze. He recognized the man not by name but by memory. He was the same man in the earlier footage, standing over the little girl Bruno had saved, clutching her protectively as chaos unfolded around them. This was her father. The timescape was less than 48 hours after the silent gate opened. "You need you to say you saw insurgents, that they used the compound to store weapons." The man refused, repeatedly. "My daughter is alive because of your dog," he said. "I will not lie for you. A beat, then a gunshot. The camera fell sideways. Malik's hands shook as he stopped the video. His jaw tightened. That man had stood between death and a child, and for that, Beckett had silenced him too. Malik stood, bracing himself against the table. Everything was connected. Bruno hadn't just witnessed a massacre. He had carried the memory of the truth back with him. The truth someone had tried to bury by erasing him entirely. And now Malik had the last surviving copy of that truth. He knew what would happen next. Someone would come for the SSD. Someone would come for Bruno, and if they had to, they'd come for Malik too. He turned to Bruno, who sat still as ever, though something in his eyes had shifted. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked ready. Malik whispered, "You saved her, didn't you?" Bruno blinked once. The car door slammed outside just as Malik snapped the laptop shut again and reached for the 9mm he kept hidden beneath the floorboards under the couch. Bruno moved before Malik gave the order, positioning himself between the front door and the window, head lowered, muscles tensed. Malik crept toward the peephole and spotted a delivery van idling at the edge of his driveway. Unmarked, the driver never got out. After 30 seconds, the van pulled away and disappeared down the road. No package was left behind, just the unmistakable taste of warning. The phone rang 10 minutes later. Malik almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity, maybe instinct, told him to pick it up. A calm voice identified itself as Special Agent Lewis from the FBI's Savannah field office, stating that they had reason to believe Malik was in possession of federal evidence related to a defunct military operation. The voice was composed, polite, even professional. They weren't accusing him of anything. They offered a neutral location, an old municipal office repurposed into temporary federal space near River Street. "You're not in trouble," the voice assured, "but the Bureau believes your cooperation could help us untangle what's clearly become a sensitive issue." Malik listened, said very little, and agreed to meet the next day at 11 a.m. After hanging up, he didn't move. He sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at Bruno, who simply tilted his head and let out a faint exhale through his nose. It sounded almost like a sigh. Something didn't sit right. Malik had spent enough time around government suits to recognize when someone was reciting a script. There was no mention of specific files, no direct question about the SSD, and no real urgency, just an oddly careful invitation to a conversation. The calm before a storm. He decided not to tell them about the drive, not even to bring it. Instead, he pulled a burner phone from the bottom of a drawer, copied the raw video files from the SSD onto a micro SD, and placed it inside the lining of his jacket. If it went bad, at least someone would find the jacket. Maybe. The next morning he left Bruno at the house, not because he didn't trust him, but because if this was a trap, he didn't want the dog walking straight into it. The drive down to River Street was quiet. The streets were half dead with construction detours and boarded-up shops, and the building in question stood alone, pale concrete stained with moss, no signage out front. Malik parked across the street, did a slow visual scan, and noted the absence of any other car, not even a single sedan you might expect in a government lot. Still, he walked up the front steps and buzzed the intercom. No answer. He buzzed again. Still nothing. He pulled the door open. It wasn't locked and stepped inside. The lobby was stripped bare. Dusty floor tiles, a broken water fountain, empty desk. No receptionist, no badges, no hum of activity. Just the quiet static of a building left to die. Malik's instincts flared. He reached for the phone in his pocket and dialed the number that had called him the night before. No answer. Then a sharp beep. "This number is no longer in service." He turned to leave, but two men appeared at the end of the hallway. Black suits. One wore mirrored aviators inside. The other had a thick neck and a bulge beneath his jacket sidearm, no doubt. "Mr. Henderson?" one of them called, his tone just shy of cordial. Malik kept walking. "We just want to talk," the man said again. Malik's steps slowed slightly. "Then why lie about the FBI?" he asked. "Why pick an empty building in a dead zone with no witnesses?" The man in aviators smiled. "To avoid misunderstandings." Malik moved fast, ducking into a side stairwell just as the taller agent reached for something inside his jacket. A voice shouted behind him, "He's bolting," and then the stairwell echoed with heavy footsteps. Malik took them two at a time, bounded out the second-floor fire exit, sprinted across the rooftop and jumped to the next building over. Gunfire cracked the air, splintering a drain pipe beside him. The roof gravel shifted under his boots as he ran, breathing steady, eyes scanning for escape. He dropped down a back alley by a rusted ladder, kept moving until he reached the car. Once inside, he peeled out, tires screaming against the pavement. He didn't head home. He drove in circles for an hour, checking mirrors, spotting shadows, until he was confident no one had tailed him. Back at the house, Bruno was waiting at the door. Malik barely had time to breathe before his phone buzzed again, but not the burner. It was his old encrypted line, the one he hadn't used in years. No name, just a number with a Colorado area code. He answered. The voice on the other end was low, rushed. "You need to get off the grid. Now? Who is this?" "They're cleaning the house. Anyone tied to Falcon Shield. Last night they destroyed the facility you taught." Malik's blood ran cold. "You're next if they know what you've seen." He didn't wait for more. He hung up, turned to Bruno and said quietly, "We're leaving." Within 10 minutes, he'd packed 2 bags, one for gear, one for evidence, and loaded them into the truck. The SSD he placed in a hollowed compartment beneath the bed. Bruno jumped in without a command. As they pulled onto the road, Malik's thoughts were racing. He knew they had eliminated Falcon Shield's main compound, the same place Bruno had likely been trained, and the last location that might have held any official records. That wasn't coincidence. That was scorched earth. They weren't salvaging the truth. They were erasing it. The road stretched long and silent ahead as Malik drove with one eye on the rearview mirror, the Georgia backroads swallowing his taillights with every mile. Bruno sat still in the passenger seat, his head low, ears perked, tail unmoving. The radio was off, the engine hummed low, and Malik's thoughts spiraled like oil on water, unsteady, dark, and full of heat. They were burning everything now, not just files but the people who held them, severing every thread that could pull the truth to daylight. He didn't know how long they had before someone found them again, but he knew they would. The kind of men who orchestrate cover-ups that reach presidential candidates didn't just give up when a lead went cold. They hunted it, silenced it, erased it. He gripped the wheel tighter. They had to go dark, truly dark. No credit cards, no cell signals, no predictable moves. He pulled into an old mechanic's yard on the edge of a freight hub south of Macon, where rusted locomotives sat like relics of a forgotten war. A contact from years back, a man named Jace who owed Malik from their Baghdad days, ran this graveyard of steel. Malik explained little, only asked if there was anything that could carry them out of sight for a day or two. Jace didn't ask questions, just nodded, handed him a key, and pointed toward a series of train cars scheduled to be shuttled out but whose paperwork had been delayed. By dusk, Malik had the truck hidden behind a stack of crushed trailers, and the bags loaded into an old boxcar hitched near the far end of the yard. He and Bruno slipped inside through a sliding side door and crouched low in the shadows. No windows, only the creaks and moans of metal cooling under the night air. They waited. Somewhere nearby, a freight engine roared to life and began pulling cars out slowly. Hours passed. Then movement. Their car jolted forward, then again, and then the slow, rhythmic pull began the heavy breath of machinery in motion. They were on the move. Malik didn't sleep, but Bruno did. Curled tight against his leg, body twitching now and then as if replaying memories neither of them wanted to revisit. Malik listened to the sounds outside, the hum of the tracks, the distant whistle echoing across empty fields. He knew they couldn't ride the train forever, but they needed the distance, needed time to plan, to decide what came next. At sunrise, the train slowed near an agricultural processing plant in northern Alabama. Malik slipped out with Bruno, vanished into the woods, and circled back to a truck stop to grab supplies. 3 hours later, they were back on the road, heading south again, cautious and indirect, looping back toward home. He needed to check it, needed to see if anything was left, even though he already knew in his gut what he would find. By nightfall, he was back within 20 miles of his land. The sky was darker than usual, no stars, just clouds and the faint smear of smoke on the wind. Bruno lifted his head, nose twitching. They turned off the main road onto the gravel path, crunching slowly through the stillness. That's when Malik saw it. The house was gone, not damaged, gone. A blackened husk stood where the porch used to be, warped beams curled upward like broken ribs. The windows had melted into their frames. The roof collapsed inward, and ash still floated in the air like silent snowfall. The barn, the shed, the fence burned. Malik hit the brakes, stared through the windshield, heart pounding not with shock but confirmation. They'd come, they'd looked for him, and when they didn't find him, they burned everything he was. Bruno growled low in his throat, then went silent. Malik stepped out of the truck, boots crunching through the ash as he approached the skeleton of his home. The fire had been recent, still hot in some spots, still smoldering underfoot. He didn't go inside. There was no inside as the hero had been with him, thank God. But everything else, his life, his photos, the memories of Amira, all of it had turned to smoke. He walked to where the front porch steps had been and stood there, fists clenched, staring into the pit of his past. A quiet rage filled his chest. Not the hot fury of revenge, but the slow, deliberate anger of a man who realized he no longer had anything to lose. He turned to Bruno. "They wanted to erase you," he said. "Now they've erased me." The dog didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the ruins with the same dead calm awareness he had shown every day since the auction. Then, off in the trees, a branch snapped. Malik's hand dropped instinctively to the sidearm at his hip, stepping sideways to shield Bruno's. Voices, footsteps, not one, multiple. The voices in the woods came closer, low and methodical, boots pressing leaves and broken twigs like the beat of a steady drum. Malik backed away from the ruins of the porch, one hand gripping his sidearm, the other gesturing low for Bruno to fall back. The dog obeyed instantly, slinking into the shadows near the truck's rear wheel well. Malik dropped to a crouch behind what remained of a brick chimney and steadied his breathing. Through the dense underbrush he spotted 3 silhouettes moving with precision. No flashlights, full gear, formation tight. Not locals, not cops. These were trained men, likely off-the-books contractors, the kind who wore no insignias and had no last names. Malik's mind raced, calculating paths of retreat, cover, elevation. But just as he reached for the spare magazine in his coat, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Not a bird, not an animal. 3 short notes coded, deliberate. The figures in the woods stopped. One turned his head. Then, without a word, all 3 turned around and vanished into the trees like mist. Malik waited 5 more minutes before emerging from cover, pistol still drawn, eyes still scanning the tree line. He hadn't seen their faces, but he had seen the shape of the weapons slung across the back of the tallest one. A suppressed MP5 with a modified stock. Rare, government grade. Only a few units in circulation. Whoever had just sniffed around his burned home had a reason to back off. And Malik didn't think it was luck. He slid behind the wheel of the truck, Bruno hopping in beside him, still tense but quiet. Malik peeled out slowly, avoiding main roads, his mind spinning like a storm. If they were tracking him, and they were, then there had to be someone else on the board, someone the other side didn't want him to meet yet. That's when the burner phone buzzed. Unknown number, no caller ID. He hesitated, then answered with a curt. A woman's voice, calm but urgent, answered back. "You're not dead, that's good. I heard about the fire." Malik stiffened. "Who is this?" "You already know." He did. Somewhere in the back of his mind, under years of dust and silence, the voice triggered a name. Rosalind Vance. "Where the hell have you been?" Malik asked. "Hiding from the same people you're running from," she replied. "You need to come to me now." She gave him coordinates. Far west into Alabama. An old ranger cabin tucked behind federal land no one patrolled anymore. He didn't ask why. He just drove. By the time Malik and Bruno reached the cabin, the moon was high and cold over the pines. Rosalind stood on the porch with a shotgun resting on her hip, and a face carved by stress, experience, and betrayal. Her hair had more gray than he remembered, her frame thinner, but her eyes the same steel blue stare that had once intimidated hardened sergeants, still burned bright. She let them in without a word. The cabin was fortified, reinforced windows, backup generator, cold storage, and the smell of burnt coffee and old paper. Maps covered one wall, red strings linking names and locations Malik recognized from whispered briefings and redacted reports. "Nice place," Malik muttered. "It's not home," Rosalind replied, pouring him a mug of something warm. "But it's what's left." Bruno sniffed the perimeter, then curled by the fireplace without a sound. Rosalind watched him for a moment, then said, "So it's true. He's still alive." "Barely," Malik said, sipping the bitter coffee. "You knew?" "I knew he was part of Silent Gate," she said. "I didn't know he survived. I thought they put him down with the rest of them." Malik set the mug down. "Why are you helping me?" Rosalind didn't answer right away. She walked over to the map wall, tapped on a photo of General Beckett, pinned above a faded newspaper clipping with the headline, "Rising Star, Soldier Statesman, Beckett's Bid for the Presidency." "I was in charge of the first investigation into what happened during that op," she said. "He assigned me after the interpreter's death was labeled a friendly fire incident. But the more I pulled, the more the brass started pushing back. Files vanished. Witnesses were reassigned. One of my analysts ended up dead in a car accident 2 weeks before he was supposed to testify. When I asked for protection, they revoked my clearance instead." "They made you a liability," Malik said. "They made me invisible," she corrected, "which, as it turns out, is useful now." Malik reached into his coat, pulled out the micro SD card and placed it on the table. "This is what they're after. It's not just the execution footage. There's a second file. It shows Beckett interrogating and executing the girl's father. On camera." Rosalind's face tightened. She looked down. Her jaw knew about the father. "I didn't know there was video." Malik leaned forward. "Then you know what we're holding. This blows everything open. It only does that if people see it," she said. "Right now, we have one copy, no backup, no safe route to publish without being intercepted." Malik nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" She looked up at him, voice low and final. "We go public. We drop it. All of it. Full upload, full exposure, no intermediaries, no redacted summaries. Just raw footage in the wild. Before Beckett locks it down for good." "And after?" Malik asked. Rosalind glanced at Bruno. "We make peace with being ghosts." She walked to a drawer, pulled out a hardened laptop with no ports except power and satellite uplink. "Before we do," she said, "I need to confirm what's on that card. We get one shot. If it fails, he dies, you die, I will disappear again." She turned to Bruno. "He's the only living witness left. Malik. The others? Gone. Burned, erased, buried in desert dust. Bruno is more than a dog. He's the archive. He's the threat." Malik stared at his partner lying near the hearth, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow and even but alert. The weight of the truth sat heavy on Malik's chest. Beckett wasn't just afraid of video files or journalistic exposure. He was afraid of the memory that walked on 4 legs, slept with one eye open, and had seen him commit the unforgivable. Rosalind loaded the SD card, her fingers steady despite the tension in the air. Malik stood behind her, hand on Bruno's collar, and waited for the screen to light up. The laptop screen flickered once, then stabilized into the cold, flat interface of a hardened OS. Lines of code trailing across the top like veins in a storm. Rosalind worked quickly, fingers dancing over keys with the muscle memory of someone who had spent years funneling secrets through back doors and burned channels. Malik stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes locked on the corner of the screen where the footage began rendering in real time. Bruno lay silent beneath the desk, unmoving, but Malik knew he was watching everything, even through closed eyes. Rosalind connected the device to an encrypted satellite uplink, rerouting through multiple nodes: Switzerland, Iceland, New Zealand, back to a shell server buried under a fake law firm in Nairobi. The plan was simple. No edits, no filters, no context. Just the raw, unflinching footage of Silent Gate. Truth in its purest, most brutal form. "It's time," she said. Malik reached into his coat, pulled out the card and placed it gently in her palm. She slid it into the reader, the drive spun, then opened. The files appeared. She double-checked their hashes against what Malik had backed up. No corruption, no overwrite. The files were clean, still breathing. Rosalind opened 3 windows, one on the dark web, one on a peer-to-peer data torrent, and one onto a ghosted public forum frequented by whistleblowers, military watchdogs, and rogue journalists. "Ready?" she asked. Malik didn't blink. "Do it." Rosalind hit send. The data burst outward like a virus set free. At first, it was quiet, a ripple on a glass lake. But within 20 minutes, the first forum exploded. View counts ticked upward. Shares, comments. The footage started surfacing on private Discord servers, then onto obscure video mirrors, and finally, inevitably, into mainstream feeds disguised as leaks. The algorithm hesitated, unsure whether to flag or then the views passed 50,000 in under an hour. By the second hour, it crossed into 6 digits. A thread broke open on Twitter. Someone identified the building from the execution clip. Another user enhanced Beckett's face, compared it to official campaign footage. A video editor from Prague stabilized the camera shake, slowing the moment Bruce shielded the girl. They called it the dog who defied orders. The hashtags began: Echo 7, Truth Unleashed, Burn the Cover. News outlets scrambled. The campaign team issued a statement calling it foreign propaganda. But too late. The footage was everywhere. Burned onto blockchains, cloned into cloud storage nodes, converted into memes, even played on protesters' phones as they marched outside Beckett's regional office in Atlanta. By morning, every major media outlet had run the story. By noon, Beckett had gone dark. No public appearance, no statement, no denial. By evening, the DJ had opened an emergency inquiry. By the following sunrise, General Richard Beckett had been arrested at his Virginia estate, removed from the home in handcuffs as flashbulbs popped like popcorn and cable anchors narrated the fall of a man once destined for the Oval Office. Rosalind and Malik sat in silence as they watched the footage unfold. Not the footage they had leaked, but the footage now being broadcast live. Beckett's stone expression, the agents flanking him, the screams of reporters outside the gates. A moment later, a national security spokesperson confirmed the authenticity of the videos. Beckett's campaign was suspended indefinitely. The military denied all knowledge of Silent Gate, but the internet did not forgive, and it certainly didn't forget. But victory didn't taste like triumph. Rosalind sat with her head in her hands, not crying, just still. Malik leaned back in the chair, eyes closed, chest heavy. Bruno sat near the cabin door, staring out into the trees like he knew it wasn't over. Malik knew that too. They had exposed a truth, yes, but they had also painted targets on their backs. The kind of truth they'd unleashed didn't just disappear into headlights. It festered in the systems that allowed it. Somewhere out there, men in darker suits, in higher towers, were already rewriting the narrative, already plotting what came next. Malik stood, cracked his knuckles and walked outside. The wind had shifted, cooler now, and the moon hung lower than before. He pulled his coat tighter, looked up at the sky and wondered for a long second if he'd made the right choice. But then he heard the faint chime of an alert from inside the cabin. He turned back. Rosalind was staring at the laptop, eyes wide, posture stiff. Malik frowned. Already, they're hitting servers, takedown orders, counter leaks. They've launched a narrative pivot calling the footage deep fake military agitprop. Malik's jaw clenched. We expected that. Rosalind's hand hovered over the keyboard. That's not all. Someone's looking for Bruno, not Beckett's team. Someone else, higher clearance, deeper reach. Malik stepped closer. How deep? She didn't answer with words. She turned the screen toward him. A black terminal blinked. A single line of text pulsed in white. Echo 7 is active. Menage Aloha was... The moment the screen showed that final blinking message, Echo 7 is... Echo 7 is... Knew they had pushed too far, too fast, and too public to hide now. There was no way to know who had triggered the kill order. But Rosalind's face told him enough. This wasn't just about Beckett anymore. It was a sweep, a clean slate. The moment Bruno's footage hit the airwaves, he had become more than a liability. He had become a symbol, and symbols in the wrong hands had to be eliminated. Malik grabbed the encrypted drive, stuffed it into his jacket, slung a bag over his shoulder and whistled once. Bruno snapped to his feet. Rosalind packed quickly, grabbed her burner gear, and by the time they stepped out the back of the cabin, the low whine of a drone overhead signaled that the clock had officially started. They took to the woods, fast and silent, not looking back. They headed for the mountain ridge, the same route Rosalind had carved out years ago as a last resort. No roads, no signals, just dirt, wind, and silence. But by the third hour, Malik heard the sound that twisted his gut, a rotor. Not one, three, and then a crack in the air, sharp and cruel. Gunfire, suppressed, coming from the south slope. They're triangulating, Rosalind said, out of breath. You keep moving. Bruno led the way, cutting through branches like memory returned to muscle. Then the first flash, a muzzle flare through the trees, then a second. Malik turned to fire and saw one of the shadows drop. The other kept coming. Bruno lunged and hit the man mid-run, teeth burying into the soft part of the vest under the arm. Malik moved to cover him, but another shot cracked the air, and the sound tore through Malik like a blade. He dropped the second man but turned too late. Bruno had been hit in the flank, blood spreading fast through his fur, dark against the black and tan. The dog didn't collapse, not immediately. Instead, he turned, staggered, and moved again, limping ahead as if driven by a compass only he understood. Malik tried to lift him, but Bruno resisted, still trying to lead. "Damn it, Bruno," Malik whispered, tears burning hot behind his eyes. "You don't have to be strong anymore." But Bruno moved on. They reached the ridge just as a fresh burst of fire chewed up bark around them. Rosaline laid cover while Malik and Bruno pressed forward. Finally, at the crest, the shooting stopped. A hard, choking kind of silence. The kind that came when something sacred was breaking. Bruno collapsed near a tree, his breathing ragged, chest rising with effort. Malik dropped beside him, pressed his hands over the wound, felt the blood warm against his palms. "No, no, no," he whispered, voice trembling. "You don't get to leave yet. You didn't come this far just to go now." Bruno blinked slowly. His tail moved once, barely a twitch. "He's crashing," she said. Malik shook his head. "He carried me through fire. He carried the truth across countries. He saved that girl. He saved me." Bruno lifted his head weakly, his eyes meeting Malik's. Not wild, not scared, just tired. "You're not just a dog," Malik said, voice breaking. "You're a damn soldier. You're the only one left who remembered what honor looked like." Bruno exhaled a final slow breath, leaned forward and rested his head against Malik's chest. Still, Malik didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, arms wrapped around the body of his friend, of his partner, of the one soul who had never needed words to speak truth. When the sun broke through the treetops an hour later, it found them that way. Rosalie stood guard while Malik buried Bruno under a tall pine near the ridge, a place where the wind moved gently and the world was quiet. They marked the spot with the last thing Bruno had carried, the broken clasp from the camera harness that had recorded it all. The story didn't end there, because someone, perhaps one of the journalists Malik had met during his early intel days, had traced the footage back to a user handle connected to an anonymous Georgia IP. The next morning, a drone captured a photo of Malik at the ridge, kneeling beside Bruno's resting place. That image spread like the fire they had tried to suppress. Not just on military forums or political networks, but across the entire world. People shared it not because of politics, but because it said something that words couldn't. It said loyalty, it said sacrifice, it said truth. A week later, a bronze statue was erected quietly in the corner of a park outside Savannah. No speeches, no cameras, just a plaque, 6 words. He never barked for nothing. If this story moved you even just a little, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's the simplest way to make sure these kinds of stories keep coming your way. I'd love to know what part hit you the hardest. Was it Bruno's final stand? Malik's fight for the truth? Or maybe the quiet moments in between? Drop a comment and tell me what you felt, and while you're at it, let me know where in the world you're watching from. Let's see how far Bruno's story can reach.